Motion carried. I will leave motion 23 until after the Taoiseach addresses conference. So on behalf of the Irish Trade Union Movement, the Irish Congress of Trade Union, I would like to welcome Taoiseach Joan Burton to address conference. Taoiseach, when you're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John, for the invitation to speak here today. It's a great pleasure to address you as the first woman leader of the Labour Party, and it's a particular pleasure to be here with Patricia King as the first woman General Secretary of Congress. I see a lot of other women listed as prominent speakers on the agenda, so I don't know whether it's girl power, but here's to the women. The conference is meeting at a time when Ireland is emerging from its greatest economic crisis of recent times. At the same time, the European Union is facing arguably its most difficult set of economic challenges and indeed social challenges. And I want to say a few words about both topics today: the battle to vindicate the economic rights of working people and the central role of social democracy in achieving that. Next year, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Rising, and we as a country will both look forward and look back. The 1916 proclamation, addressed to Irish men and Irish women, envisaged a republic of equal rights, equal opportunities and prosperity for all. And that particular section of the proclamation was penned by James Connolly himself. Our recent economic crisis challenged that vision, but we are beginning to come out on the right side. Ireland is in a recovery now. It's a rapid recovery for some, and we're perfectly placed to deliver a decade of strong growth, of good jobs, and of opportunity. People's economic rights are just as central as their social rights to living a full life. And that's the right to the best education we can provide, the right to a job with decent pay and conditions, the right to an affordable and a secure home, the right to health care based on need and not on your pocket or your purse, and the right to security of income in retirement. So as we look ahead from 2016, our challenge is to secure the economic rights of people at work. Crucially, we have the opportunity to achieve that. I've always said I want a social recovery alongside our economic recovery. The economic recovery is built on sustainable foundations, and importantly, it's jobs-led. There are now more than 100,000 additional people at work, and unemployment has fallen by over a third. Most of the jobs are full-time, and many of them are well-paid, high-tech, high levels of qualification. Considering where we were when the Labour Party came into government in 2011, it is significant progress. But I want to make it clear it's not enough. I'm ambitious for more, just as you are all ambitious for more. One of the first things I did as Minister for Social Protection upon entering office was to restore the national minimum wage. And in the last budget, as soon as the resources were available, we reduced taxes for low and middle income earners to begin the process of restoring and improving living standards. But there is more to do. Some employers are engaged in a relentless drive for competitiveness in a globalised market. In a globalised market, in many cases, they have to. But as a result, workers face demands for more flexibility, and their conditions of employment can be under threat. The threat of a race to the bottom is all too real. And increasingly, workers are facing this threat in workplaces where trade unions are discouraged or simply ignored or prevented. I believe very strongly that government cannot simply stand aside and allow the race to the bottom to happen without restraint. I believe in a mixed economy. I believe in free trade. But I also believe that government has a duty to intervene to ensure that people's living standards and working conditions are protected and improved. That duty extends to international bodies as well. In fact, the most effective way to secure such protections is through binding international arrangements. I believe it's the duty of government to set standards, to set out what is acceptable and what is not, to ensure that the voice of workers is heard. That's why when I became leader of the Labour Party, I specifically appointed Jed Nash as Minister of State in Cabinet with particular responsibility for this area. Last week, the Industrial Relations Bill was passed by this soil, and it will become the law of the land shortly. And I want to thank the many people here at the top table, but particularly in the hall, who have campaigned over the decades for these kind of reforms to be brought through the Dáil Éireann. The bill largely reinstates registered employment agreements, REAs. It also provides for sectoral agreements. Many of those who will be covered by the legislation work in exposed or low-paid sectors of the economy. The bill provides us with an important tool to protect their conditions of employment. The bill also provides for collective bargaining, which is a cherished ambition of the trade union movement, and it establishes for the first time that workers in non-unionised workplaces are entitled to work with trade unions if they want to. It also provides that they will have recourse to the industrial relations machinery in order to establish norms in conditions of work. And this is a hugely important step. A strong trade union movement helps raise living standards. It's that simple. And that's why Labour made collective bargaining central to the programme for government. And we're now delivering on it. The International Labour Organization, the ILO, has said that uniquely among countries that faced an economic crisis, Ireland enhanced workers' rights where others reduced them. But we do have to be vigilant. Predator capitalism can deprive people of their livelihoods in an instant, as happened at Cleary's. I don't believe it's right that the owners can act as they did while leaving workers in the lurch, and the state, everybody here who's paying their taxes and paying their PRSI, leaving the state facing the redundancy bill. We've better things to do with social protection money than bail out the Cleary's owners. So, given that the effect of the owner's actions is to place its private obligations to pay redundancy onto the state, just let me say this. I'm going to use every legal avenue to vindicate the state and taxpayers' rights in this regard. And you know, the Insolvency Fund will secure the redundancy payments for workers. That's what those workers are entitled to. And I want to thank ICTU for making Liberty Hall available to the department to allow us to go in and to meet the workers and also to facilitate the liquidation arrangements, because that was very practical help in a situation where even the premises wasn't available to do the normal contact that the Department of Social Protection would do in this kind of difficult situation of a big closure. A wage-led recovery has a vital role to play in raising living standards. Congress is already playing its part in fighting for this. And I want to say unambiguously that I want to see wage increases, negotiated wage increases, this year and next in all the sectors of the economy where employers can afford to pay more. And as you all know, many employers have been doing this last year, are doing it again next year, and planning for future years. Government will play its part in increasing take-home pay. In the forthcoming budget, we will continue to reduce taxes on low and middle-income workers. In addition, my colleague Brendan Howlin has reached agreement with the public sector unions to start the process of reversing pay cuts. I know that some of your member unions have yet to vote on the proposals. I sincerely hope that the proposals will be agreed and people will vote yes. But not everyone in Leinster House believes that the restoration of public service pay is a political or an economic priority. There are some who are actively hostile to any such idea. As Labour leader, I take the view that properly resourced public services are a vital ingredient of a decent society, and pay levels have to reflect this within the bounds of what can be afforded. Those services, ranging from good quality schools, healthcare facilities, and public parks, to roads and other essential infrastructure, these are vital to people's quality of life. So in building a recovery dividend, obviously it is about issues like people's pay, about the impact of taxation, about the reform of USC. But it's also about the schools your children use, the hospitals your parents go to. It's about the public transportation systems that we use. It's about the support for apprenticeships and for employment and opportunity for everybody. And that's why, making a modern budget is so complex. It's the capital programme, which we will be launching in a couple of months' time to commit our taxes to building better infrastructure for our country. It's about the investment into public services, including the Lansdowne Road Agreement, if that should be agreed, and I hope it will. And it's also about the forthcoming budget and the fiscal space to continue the reform of the USC, to lift more people on low incomes out of USC, and to achieve that in a way that does not endanger the recovery, but actually adds to the growth potential for Ireland, for jobs and for investment. This month we'll also see the first report of the Low Pay Commission. I hope and I expect that it will recommend an increase in the minimum wage. And I just want to say any potential anomaly in the PRSI system arising from the Commission's recommendations will be addressed at the appropriate time in the budget. The minimum wage is, of course, the minimum value which we put on work. It's a protection against exploitation, but it's not a guarantee of fair wages, nor is it a guarantee of adequate wages. For that reason, I've been proud to sign the Living Wage Initiative and the Congress pledge in relation to that. In the first instance, the living wage should operate as a voluntary benchmark. That's happened very successfully in some major cities. What we're looking for is a new consensus, both at national and at European level, of what constitutes a wage that is enough to provide for a decent standard of living. In support of this view, I will, like the devil, quote scripture for my own purposes, and in this instance, the Gospel according to the IMF and the OECD. Research from both these august bodies has found that if the income share of the top 20% in a country increases, economic growth actually declines over the medium term. In stark contrast, an increase in the income share of the bottom 20% will fuel higher growth. So a living wage is in everybody's interest, even if that is not sufficiently clear to everybody right now. For some time now, policy across the Western world has been determined by a fear that redistribution would damage growth. I welcome the evidence that now challenges that belief. And I think we need to think long and hard about the measures needed to reverse the trend, both here and at home, and no less importantly, through common European action. Which brings me to Europe's challenges. Greece is top of the agenda, of course. These are challenging times for those of us who value the role of collective European action in confronting the after effects of the long recession we and many other European countries have endured. I want to see a deal that can bring an end to Greece's very real humanitarian crisis. I want to see a deal that will put Greece on the road to economic recovery, and more importantly, the Greek people. Above all, I want to see Greece remaining an active member of the Eurozone, and for all members to resist complacency about the potential effects of Greece being left or forced to exit. So let's be clear, this is going to be a long and difficult road. The Greek government will have to play its part. The demonisation on both sides must stop because it risks undermining the European project. And let's not forget how important the European project is. It's the continuing battle to vindicate workers' economic rights. The EU is going to be central in that battle, because the plain truth is there are global forces in finance and in international capital that require collective action by nation states to secure proper regulation. I can mention a few: energy security, climate change, migration, and terrorism stand out as other challenges that individual states cannot handle on their own. That's the modern reality. Let us not forget that while Ireland had to fight for and ultimately win concessions that reduced our debt burden by tens of billions of euro, we did do so at the negotiating table. Member States ultimately rode in behind us, just as the ECB bond buying programme of this year has given breathing space to the European economy as a whole. That collective agreed way forward has been the basis on which we have built and are building a recovery that now offers us immense opportunity. And I want precisely the same for Greece, no more and no less. In terms of a wider, more longer-term European renewal that places economic and social rights for people at its centre. I think a shift in approach is badly needed. It was Henry Ford who once said, "If an employer does not share prosperity with those who make him prosperous, then pretty soon there'll be no prosperity to share." The EU needs to recognise this and put a mix of policies on the table to enhance workers' skills, increase their incomes, and improve their purchasing power. Progress on this front would be a massive step in vindicating people's economic rights and in improving their standard of living. And that is the challenge that's ahead of us in the next decade, at home and abroad. As Taoiseach and Labour leader, I want to see a decade of progress in Ireland that delivers on the social democratic vision at the heart of the labour and trade union movement throughout our history. And I don't want to see a situation where either children or communities are left out. And we're told that some children are not necessarily going to achieve as much as other children because the parents are not well off or they're not involved in work. I mean, we have in this country a very, very good social welfare system which we all consent to contribute to build, to provide particularly for security when people retire through the state retirement pension, which is limited, but which is very solid and strong. The actual social insurance fund is now almost back in balance, and these issues are important. But it's also important that we don't accept that an 18-year-old can end up leaving school and end up going on social welfare for maybe 4 or 5 years. We need to get that young person into an apprenticeship, into a training, into a work experience. We have to do that because the social welfare system is there to support and help people, but it's also like a trampoline. It's there to catch you when you need the help, but it's also there to help you to spring back up again and to be able to live your life independently and help you with that. And that's been consistently the vision in Ireland of the labour and of the trade union movement, that work and being in work is important to people's lives and people's participation in our society. And that includes, for instance, people who have a disability. Connolly said, and I'll finish on this, "Ireland means nothing to me without its people." And to be honest, I think the trade union movement has lived up to Connolly's commitment, not just to a territory, which we love, but actually also to the people whom we are responsible for ourselves, but we are all responsible for each other in solidarity, as people in the trade union movement would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Taoiseach. I would now like to call on General Secretary Patricia King to respond to the Taoiseach. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Taoiseach. I was just thinking, which worried me a little bit, I was thinking similarly to yourself. You made your opening comments about the gender balance, because actually in the trade union movement, I think we're showing signs that it's beginning to work, because we have, attending our conference, we have Sharon Burrows, who's the General Secretary of the ITUC, and Bernadette Segal from the ETUC, General Secretary, and Frances O'Grady will be with us as General Secretary of the TUC, and of course here ourselves we have Sheila Noonan, General Secretary of the INTO, Patricia McKeown from Unison, and Avril Hall-Callahan, among others, in Northern Ireland. So I think the gender balance piece is starting to work. Long may that continue. So I just want to, Taoiseach, to join with the President and the Conference Hall in welcoming you and thank you for taking the time out of what must be a very busy schedule given the political time and so on where we're at to come along, and I know delegates wanted to eagerly listen to your address. And I suppose the purpose of taking the opportunity to respond is that on the one hand, we've had so far in the conference, we've had quite a considered debate on a number of key issues that concern trade union members. The trade union movement in this Congress doesn't speak entirely with one voice, which is quite right, but it certainly definitively shares common principles. And normally as well, when we're making our comments, we have to be somewhat rooted in reality and in the actual reality. It doesn't always happen, but we try hard to root our comments based on the reality. And one of the realities, of course, for yourself is that you're a minority party in a government with another party which is quite right-wing in terms of how it does its business. And this is the background that you face. But I think we need to take the opportunity to set out for you some of the major concerns that this movement has debated in this Congress, and I think it's only right that we would take the opportunity to do it. And you mentioned in your speech, of course, the collective bargaining legislation, and that took a long time, and yourself and indeed predecessors were involved with us in terms of trying to get that piece. Now, as we mentioned earlier in our debate, it's a complex piece of legislation. And the trade union movement will have to work hard to make it and to develop it and to return for workers exactly the pieces that are in it, and that could be positive. But one of the things, obviously, that concerns us and still concerns us greatly is, I suppose, the weakness in terms of trade union access, a lot of which was dealt with by the Supreme Court in the Ryanair case, and which we have to find ways and means to deal with that in the future. But a very key point of the debate here, Taoiseach, has been the issue of precarious work. And this is a very growing phenomenon right across the economy, north and south. And in this debate, we have identified that effectively these are tools used by precarious work in various forms, and it goes right across education, health, and hospitality, retail, but it's a tool used by employers to manipulate and to effectively get their own way. And we heard Murren here from Dunn Stores this morning, I think said it in very direct, and you didn't have to really find any other clarification of it. They use it to effectively bully workers to do what they want to do, how they want to do it, when they want to do it, all to maximise their profit. And the key piece of it is they don't care about the workers that they're doing it to. And that precarious work piece, I understand that Minister Nash has done and has commissioned a review through Limerick University for low hours and contracts and so on. Now, I'm hoping that the government will use that review, which we hope will come out in September. I'm hoping, Taoiseach, that the outcome of that review will be used to make the necessary amendment to the legislation, particularly the Organisation and Working Time Act, where these employers will not be able to legally do that again. We need the banded hours contracts, we need the roster piece put in, and we need to ensure that when an employer behaves like that, up front they are breaking the law. So therefore we amend the law to make sure that that is put together again. You draw attention in your contribution, Taoiseach, in relation to this issue about the living wage, and I thank you for, and indeed all of the Labour Party members in Leinster House, they all signed our charter contract for Congress Charter, which outlines the living wage as the first piece in the 5 propositions we have for fair working conditions. And as we said at our conference earlier, actually all of the parties of the left have signed up to the Congress Charter. So there isn't a division in the left in relation to it. But I just want to acknowledge that Jerry Light and myself were appointed onto the Low Pay Commission. And of course, when you're appointed to such a commission, I only learned it afterwards. Maybe I would have done something different. I'd say Jerry might have as well. But this word, we're sworn to secrecy then, you see. And that's not my, I have to say, it's not my forte. But anyway, we were sworn to secrecy when we go on to it. But here we are, and we're 2 low-pay commissioners. And one of the things, and I don't think Jerry would disagree with me on this, we went on to it and we thought actually it was go in and you make your arguments about, and the next thing there was this vicious assault, all set out in the employer submissions. This is not breaking the secrecy code now. And out they came with all of this stuff, and it is give them nothing. Actually, there was in side interactions which were out on the street, which I can tell you about, they were suggesting actually that the provisions for lowering the minimum wage weren't strong enough. That's the background now. And the reason I bring that to your attention is that we're not allowed to say anything much. The report will go to the government, but I don't think anybody should be under any illusion. This is difficult stuff. And the trade unions will stand up and will not forget where they came from in relation to dealing with this. I just want to make everybody aware of that. And Taoiseach, our commitment to equality, fairness and social justice is the cornerstone of our movement, and that's why we played such a vital role in the civil marriage equality campaign. Congress has always been and has a long history of supporting the LGBT rights, and we're proud of the work of our group, the Trade Unions for Civil Marriage and Equality, and we acknowledge your part and indeed your predecessor's part in changing the Constitution, which has changed the lives of thousands of people in Ireland. We're also very proud of the trade unions in Northern Ireland who are to the fore in demanding that marriage equality happens in Northern Ireland as well. Now, and I think Taoiseach, that sense of fairness and decency which informed the yes vote has been reflected also in support by the public generally for those who are, and workers who are really treated badly by unscrupulous employers. And the public has responded so spontaneously to that disgraceful treatment of, as you mentioned, the workers in Cleary's and the contemptuous behaviour of Mrs Heffernan in Dunnes Stores towards her workers. And I think it is in that context of fairness that people here in this conference have debated and have brought it up and raised it. And it's only, I think, appropriate that I would say it to you. It's in that context of fairness that people have such difficulty taking on board, for instance, cuts to lone parents and the consequent hardship. And it is, I will share with you, it is hard to reconcile that, Taoiseach, when you see one of the wealthiest citizens in the land who wields massive power and influence, and he doesn't even pay a penny tax in the state, and he receives a banking write-down. Now, I know, Taoiseach, that you have said that you are reviewing that allowance, and it is not a simple issue, it's a complex matter, and I hope that when you're in the course of that review that you will take that on board. Another matter that you mentioned in your contribution was the issue of pension. And there has been in this movement a growing disquiet about this matter of the extension of the age, and without the extension of the old age pension age, and without any option for a worker to continue and work. That has left a big void for people. That has had serious implications, quite apart from the fact that it has very gender imbalanced as well, by virtue of previous, long before we had anything to do with anything, there were rules and regulations about people people in relation to women and their entitlements and so on, all of which were somewhat dealt with in the equality legislation, but that legacy still remains there. And apart from that, people not having an option to continue in work is a really bad space for workers, hasn't been dealt with sufficiently, and we'd ask you that you would positively review that. I'm glad, Taoiseach, that you raised this matter in your contribution about young people, because we know that today the challenges young people face are often those that we could never even have imagined that they would face. And despite the top quality of our education system, and there are an awful lot of people in the room who are involved in delivering that education service, and there are other professionals who are involved in the delivery of services to young people, but they know that sometimes it goes wrong. And when it goes wrong, it's horrendous. I know that myself in my own family fairly recently, and I can tell you that hurt never ends. And I know it strikes me that we have to revamp our policies to get into a place where, as you rightly say, we have a pathway that just doesn't allow people fall through it. I'm always and have been particularly allergic to job bridge. I have to say that's just me. But I do think that both Ministers Quinn and O'Sullivan were right to pursue the apprenticeship scheme. A good, solid apprenticeship scheme that gives dual learning on the job, in the classroom, like the Danes do it, like the Finnish do it, like the Germans do it. Not every kid wants to go through third level. Not every one of them can. But most children, most parents, when they look at their new child, say, that child has talent, and we'll do our best to realise that talent. And every one of the parents want that child to do their best. And actually, I'm on the Apprenticeship Council, as you know, and Eamon Devoy is with me on it. And one of the very, I suppose, enlightening things that's happening is the level of talent that's out there and the level of will among actually providers and employers who actually want to do something to develop this in the correct way. Now, there's a proposal going to the government to put in resources for an extension of certain apprenticeships way outside the construction industry, including the construction industry, but outside of the construction industry. And I would ask you, Taoiseach, to put in some level of energy into asking the government. Not everybody needs to become a NEET. Every one of them should have the opportunity to develop themselves to their maximum potential. And I do feel passionately about that, and I would really ask that when that report goes to government, it would receive the necessary resources. Finally, Taoiseach, since 2009, we've had no structured dialogue, as you know, either with government or with private sector employers. And over the past 4 years, there have been positive decisions. You mentioned, and I saw Jimmy Kelly spoke to you there earlier in relation to the Waterford Glass pension. There have been some positive decisions, but there also have been very highly controversial decisions, as you well know. And over that time, notwithstanding all of that, I want to acknowledge that we've had access to you and your colleagues at the Cabinet table from the Labour Party. And I do particularly want to acknowledge the work of Minister Nash, because we've worked quite closely with him. So we know, Taoiseach, that a fair society cannot and will not be achieved without the direct influence of the trade union movement. And we look forward to a realignment, as was called for yesterday in this conference, of the political order, north and south, that places equality at its heart. Once again, may I thank you for coming along, making your contribution, and I look forward to working with you as you continue in office. Thank you very much indeed.